How's it going? You should have read from page 11 down to page 15, and that's what I'm going to look at today. I'm aware this is kind of very segmented and broken up, but again, it's an important thing we need to look at, and there's loads to kind of pick apart for each section. Now, at the beginning of this section, we get this great little quote because the nephew leaves and he says a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, etc. And he then says it to the clerk who's working in the corner, kind of one of Scrooge's employees. And it says, his nephew left the room without an angry word notwithstanding. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. Now, obviously, there are several different ways of looking at the word cold. There are different interpretations of what that means, and obviously, you can tell what Dickens is doing there. You talk about people giving the cold shoulder, a cold call, all these kind of different uses of that word. Now, this time, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge. Yeah, you will have seen that. They barely put anything on the fire. This place is freezing cold because the fog goes through the chink and keyholes. Yeah, do you remember that from last time? Now, if it's that cold in, you can imagine how cold these workers are going to be. It's going to be absolutely freezing. Now, Dickens is using that and saying that even the clerk, who is freezing cold, quite literally, is still warmer than Scrooge. Bit of a play on words there. Warmer being another word for kind of kind and familial, etc. But that's one of the first ones I think you should look at and definitely note down that one. Income to charity workers. Now, you need to know about the Poor Law from the 1800s that was brought in as a way of trying to help people get back on their feet and help people survive, basically, in Victorian London. If you don't know about that, please do look at it now before you kind of carry on watching this. People are walking in and they say, Scrooge and Marley's, I believe, said one of the gentlemen referring to his list. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Now, this is the first time we learn actually how long it's been since Marley's been dead, and we find out it's been 7 years. So it's been a long time, and obviously that's going to be relevant very, very soon. And it's also the anniversary. Look, he died 7 years ago this very night. So we're getting these kind of inciting incidents that are happening where things are starting to fall in line and we're kind of getting a bit, okay, something's perhaps going to happen here that we need to pay attention to. Basically, they're asking, as you'd have seen, for donations. And Scrooge asks, are there no prisons? Now, Scrooge is not a stupid man. He knows there are prisons. He knows they're there. He is asking an unethical question there. He's setting them up. He's almost finding some humour in this, that he knows he's going to have a kind of punchline that he can give. Yeah? So he even references the Poor Law that we just talked about there, and the treadmill, the union workhouses. Again, you should have looked into this, but again, workhouses were not an enjoyable place to be. Dangerous as well. Many, many, many people died in those, and kind of horrific crushings and stuff in the machinery. Now, when the gentleman replies, both very busy, sirs, and yeah, that's really busy, that's kind of why we need your money. Scrooge is aware of that. He's aware that's what they want it for, but he still kind of plays along. Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it. Now, this is when Scrooge kind of begins to lose his patience a bit. What shall I put you down for? Nothing, replied Scrooge. You wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone. Now, obviously a bit of foreshadowing there, because we know from the title that Marley's ghost is the name of the stave, so we can probably guess we're going to see someone who's not going to be left alone. Then we get a even darker answer, and it says, many who can't go there and many would rather die. And Scrooge's response is, characteristically awful. If they would rather die, said Scrooge, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that. If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Now, if you look up surplus, it is a term used in kind of markets in terms of capital and product. Scrooge is using this to describe a population, which is people. But to him, it's a number. It's a statistic. It doesn't really matter how much suffering there is, because it's just a figure. It's a business transaction almost. By the way, anyone who's in my class will know that I have a very hard time saying the word statistic. So I'd like a round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you very much for getting it right twice. Boom. Now, again, we're seeing that he's not bothered about the individual. Earlier we saw this with the fact that he answered to both Marley and Scrooge's name. Yeah? And here, it's not my business, Scrooge returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business. Basically, keep to yourself, look after yourself, that's it. That's what he's kind of saying there. Eventually, the person leaves, seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, they withdrew. Okay? He resumed his labours with an improved opinion of himself, so he's happy, in a more facetious temper than usual with him. Then we zoom out again. Dickens zooms out back to London. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickens so. So we're getting pathetic fallacy there, which we should be very, very familiar with. So that people ran about with flaring links, proffering their services to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. The fog is getting so bad that people are actually offering to hold a torch and walk in front of a carriage going down the street because it's so thick with fog. Like we saw earlier, it's palpable. It's almost kind of a liquid. Now, this is obviously setting the scene. It's getting darker and darker and darker. We're not yet at a superlative. We're not yet at the darkest, the foggiest. We're still at comparatives at the moment. And here we have some right here. Foggier yet and colder, piercing, searching, biting cold. Okay? Again, that personification, piercing, searching, biting, the asyndetic list. There's no time almost to include connectives because we need to get to the point that this is piercing, searching, biting, and cold. The rest of it doesn't matter. We need to understand as readers how dark, dank, and kind of forceful this is almost in terms of the weather. So foggier yet and colder, comparative adjectives there. Now this is the part that often is seen as quite comedic. Bit of comedic relief for you. Don't worry, I won't do it. Some of you know what I mean. Stoop down. So, someone appears at the keyhole, and it's with a Christmas carol, and there's some kids singing there, and whatever. God bless you, merry gentlemen, make nothing in his name. And have they barely finished that line by the time Scrooge has seized the ruler, as in the thing that the person's conducting them with such an energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog, and even more congenial frost. Okay? So he's seized it with such energy. It's actually kind of one of the first bits of real movement and energy we've seen from Scrooge. He's usually quite lax and laid back. We have this paragraph here. Okay? Now, for this one, what I'd like to do is this. Think about why there's such negative semantic fields. We've already kind of spoken about this, so this should be quite easy. But just a bit of kind of reminder for you and revision of this. Why so negative? Melancholy dinner. The melancholy tavern. His deceased partner. The gloomy suite of rooms. Old enough, dreary enough. Yeah? That pattern of using the same phraseology throughout. So dark, fog and frost, mournful meditation, and I've not even highlighted them all. Yeah? Why use such negative things? What do we need to understand about Scrooge? And secondly, how might this, including of the setting of his kind of choice of where he is, so he goes to a melancholy tavern and a melancholy dinner. This is on Christmas Eve, remember? And, he lives in a dark, dreary, mournful meditation of a kind of accommodation. How does this change the audience's view of Scrooge's character. It's no longer just a really miserable guy, but even everything around him, his home, his possessions, where he eats, the food itself, is dark. What does that change about what we know about him? And does it add any extra layers? Yeah, think about the idea of hyperbole and the structural features that we've looked at, which I'll put around somewhere. Right, cool. So, the final thing for you is just to read the rest of Stave 1. Okay? So make sure you've read the rest of Stave 1. If you've already done that, you're good. You're done for today after you've done those things. Otherwise, can you do that, please? And I will see you next time. Bye.